video is going to be a recommendation list video. This is something that I've been thinking about for the past few months as well. I realize I say that in every video. I feel like I think about a lot of different things at once for a very long time. To make this book list, I think precisely because I felt like oftentimes we lack the words or we lack the resources to work towards healing and to work towards collective care. And so I have been going around trying to find different books that help me discover what that means, at least for myself or my community. And these are the books that I found that were pretty helpful. Disclaimer, I have not read all of them yet, but I have read about 3 or 4 of them completely, and the others I've kind of dipped into, but I wanted to share them anyway. These books are not very common still, but I kind of feel like society is moving to a point where we've been focusing so hard on the battles that have to be fought, but not so much on the healing that has to happen before we progress. And that's why I feel like being able to invest in what it means to heal and to care for one another would be a really important skill moving forward. So enough of that intro. So these are 5 books that I personally recommend on the topics of trauma, care and recovery, healing, etc. The very first book that I want to recommend is Take Care of Yourself, The Art and Cultures of Care and Liberation. Now this is such an amazing book. This is by Sundus, Abdul, Hadi. I can't really recommend this enough. I really do think that this kind of addresses all these ideas of collective care, and especially in marginal communities, although of course Sundus kind of questions and pushes back on the idea of marginality, like about how communities that have historically been kind of put outside, sidelined, how these communities can create their own spaces. And the best part is that the author actually executed this vision by creating an art exhibition in which artists kind of came together and contemplated upon what their notions of healing was and what their notions of trauma and recovery were. And I just felt like even though it's such a thin book, it gave me a lot of very important insights and a framework that I myself want to incorporate as I move forward. It is also kind of my personal goal to be able to learn how to manage spaces, to keep them safe, and to kind of encourage this collective healing. So definitely this book helped me a lot in that. And I think if you're someone who is just so tired from having to hear about all this distressing news all the time, and especially if you're someone from a minority or kind of marginal community, I think it's even more important because Sundus does talk a lot about collective healing, and really about creating that kind of space for your community. So really such an important book. Yes, it's about decolonizing the act of care as well. So really I can't recommend this book enough. Really fantastic read. Now moving on to the second book, it would be Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds by Adrienne Marie Brown. Now this is a book that I am currently reading, and interestingly enough, I've seen a lot of climate activists kind of cite Adrienne Marie Brown's work, which is super interesting to me because it's like Adrienne, as in I guess Brown kind of Adrienne, I don't know whether to go by Adrienne or Brown, but this author really talks about political strategy and about organizing, and definitely it draws a lot of inspiration from nature. So maybe that's why climate activists tend to really resonate with this kind of strategy. So I really found it super enlightening. I think what Adrienne Marie Brown does best is to provide very clear frameworks for transformative justice, for social justice work that is equal parts like abstract and theoretical, but also very practical. The next book I want to recommend is Healing Resistance, A Radically Different Response to Harm by Kazu Haga. And this is about healing as a response to harm. And I think this really is an important idea to catch on to, especially when we talk about what happens after harm, because I think instant reactions to harm might, I think anger is a good thing. I think anger is a good emotion, but it's not really very sustainable. In the immediate aftermath of such incidents that are really distressing, I think what comes long term after that, it's a huge uncertainty. And so for myself, like, I was kind of tired of feeling angry and hurt over and over again, and I was thinking that I need to find a framework that works for healing, for being able to resist, but also find a ever sustaining source of that resistance. And this is something that I learned from kind of learning about different activisms here in Singapore. And I realized that activism as a whole is still very much perceived as a very angry fight, perceived as reducing harm, but what does that reducing harm also includes being able to see how to prevent that harm, but also being able to overcome that harm. And this is a book that I have not read yet, but I am planning to read when it comes to the aftermath of harm. And yeah, I just am really very interested in this book. I think healing is such a big topic for me right now. So if any of you do pick up the book, do let me know what you think. I think I'll be reading it in the next month or in the coming month. But I wanted to include this in the list because I've seen people reviewing it and people saying that it was quite a useful book. Now, the fourth book that I want to recommend is this book, which I have here. It's called The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind and Body in the Healing of Trauma by Bessel van der Kolk. Now, this is a book that I think so many people have read, people not just in social justice kind of, communities or people who are interested in that, but lots of people across the board. I think so many people have advocated for this book with regards to their own personal recovery. And I know from what I've read so far, it's very neuroscience heavy, and it takes a very comprehensive view of trauma and how that is kind of remembered in the body. Definitely, this book is something that I would say is more related to personal trauma, but there is kind of a collective experience as well, because there's a whole trend, and you cannot deny that there are these patterns that emerge when you look at how trauma is inflicted onto communities and so forth. Now, the very last book that I want to recommend is called Turn This World Inside Out, The Emergence of Nurturance Culture by Nora Samaran. And this is a book that was also kind of recommended by Adrienne Brown. I think it does talk about very similar things, but I am really interested in the idea of nurturance, and this also comes into my own kind of like grappling with my own gender as well, because I've always kind of rejected the feminine, and I always thought that everything that I have to do has to be devoid of the feminine and devoid of like anything that might give me away as a woman. But I think lately I've been thinking a lot about how reclaiming my feminine identity can be a political act, and how actually in today's activism we need kind of acknowledgement of the emotional labor that goes into it. And I don't want to label things as like feminine or masculine, but definitely there is like the nurturing qualities, the nurturance that happens in communities is such an essential part of progress. And oftentimes when we talk about political progress, we talk about all sorts of social progress, we tend to forget the immense amounts of emotional labor that goes into it. So when I read Feminist City by Leslie Kern, the author did talk about a segment on political protests and how she as a woman, but also as a young mother, had to be excluded from the act of protesting because it is a very ableist kind of action. You can't really protest if you're not an able-bodied person, and to some extent you also can't if you are a mother that is having to grapple with having to balance different duties in a day. You are not available to protest and to give up your time and resources like that, as compared to maybe single dads or like young single people. So I think that really made me understand that what we think as activism, what we think as advocacy, who does it exclude, and what parts of it are we not acknowledging as essential to such movements. And I think nurturance is definitely one of those aspects that I identified, and I do want to look more into it because, as I mentioned, healing, trauma, recovery, these are things that require you to look more inwards and to take a slower, more intentional approach to recovery, which is not something that we often talk about when it comes to activism. So I think that these are the 5 books that ultimately I think they have a constant theme of healing and of nurturing and of finding a type of activism that's a lot more, how do I say this, like a lot more about collective progress and a lot more about care, rather than against the oppressor or against the structure. It's more of uplifting and empowering the community that's being excluded and being distressed, which I think is a change in my mindset that I haven't thought of for a long time, because like it's kind of different, right? I think when you shift your focus that way, of course you have to do both sides, definitely. But I do think that nowadays I tend to neglect this kind of care aspect of what it means to be invested in social progress, and such. So I hope these books are helpful to you in some way, or if not, I do hope that at the very least they provide some kind of comfort to you. I think in today's news there's a lot of very distressing news about harm that's being inflicted over and over and over and over and over again, and it can get quite tiring. I think receiving this kind of news in itself is quite distressing, and I would say that from my position in Singapore, I am still very safe and I'm still very privileged to be able to turn off when I want to. I'm not out there in the streets fighting and being directly attacked, and I think that's a huge privilege I have here in this country, although I don't think that kind of excuses anyone. I don't think that invalidates anyone's feelings of distress from receiving all this news. And I hope that these books will provide some kind of clarity, some kind of soothing to your day, no matter what you are going through. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it helped. Sorry for the minor disruptions throughout. There might be some noises here and there, but I tried my best to stay calm. And yeah, thanks so much for tuning in all the way, and I hope that you're feeling alright today. If you're not, it's really okay to take a day to yourself and to rest. Every day, if you can't be fighting every day, and you do deserve some kind of rest, and especially if you have experienced some kind of community hurt and collective grief, I do think that you totally deserve that time to yourself and to build up your own kind of comfort and to build up your own sense of self-love. I think that is extremely important as well. So that's it from me. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for the next video, I guess. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, do comment down below an act of self-care that you always do for yourself or for your community whenever you're feeling a bit low or down. And yeah, I'll look forward to reading that. And yeah, thanks so much, and see you.